But in this computer, there's a man named Lucas from 1546 that's supposedly communicating. Now, this story is about a guy named Ken, his girlfriend Debbie, and they moved into the Meadow Cottage in 1984. Now, the house, it was old, and because of that, like I think every single story that we've ever told, there was some renovation going on. But to help out his friend Nicola, which they called Nick in the story, Nick basically stayed with him to kind of help with the renovations and everything else. So, of course, shortly after the renovations, like every single story that we ever tell and what's happening, they start seeing and talking about different footprints that no paint could ever cover. We're talking ever cover. Objects was being moved and rearranged in ways that made absolutely no sense. Cold drafts and occurrences that should have never happened. The interesting thing about these footprints is they had 6 toes.
6 toes?
6 toes. But he's like, basically at this point in time, I have a trial. I have a trial tomorrow. He goes, I don't know what to do. He goes, but I'm going to go in front of all these people, and if I fail that trial, I will be put to death. Welcome to Deceptive Reality. So, Nick, we've told some pretty crazy stories. I'm not even going to lie. We've told some that kind of makes you lean back and go, what in the world is going on? This is one of those stories. Nick, did you know anything about this story? I know I gave you a little bit of info, not a lot, but
I didn't know a thing about this, and I'm at once excited and intimidated by what we're going to go through here.
Both of us is intimidated. This is a huge story. For anyone that doesn't know, kind of like what I've explained, this story is so huge. It's based on a book called The Vertical Plane. And the guy that wrote the book, that's the Ken that's in our story, and he's writing it from his point of view.
Okay, I'd wondered about that.
Yes. The tough part of this story is not necessarily anything that's abnormal. It's more so the case that there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of messages. You know, we talked about the computer, and I think that's what everyone's curious about. Oh, cool, paranormal story, but hey, let's get to the computer. We're going to have to put the computer on the back burner for a little while, because that's not how this entire story starts out. It starts out a little bit deeper, and honestly, kind of the way most of our paranormal stories kind of start. They're not too far off. The basics of it is Ken and Debbie, they move into this place called Meadow Cottage. Now, whenever I think of cottage, I think of those like, what's the paintings? The guy that Kincaid, he always does like the little cottage photo. Like that's what I think of. This isn't the case. It's just a house, but Meadow Cottage is where everything's happening. So I might refer to it as cottage. I might refer to it as their house, whatever it is, but it's a little small house in what's known as Dodleston, which is near the Welsh border. Now, they consider the messages that's coming back and forth in this computer, which we're not getting to, as the Dodleston Messages.
Okay, so this is in the UK?
Yes, this is a UK-based story, which makes it even more fascinating.
Yeah, we don't travel over there too much, although the last one was there too.
Yeah, the only real big ones was the last one, the Enfield poltergeist, obviously based in the UK.
Yes, yeah.
So we've done a couple big stories. This is probably by far the most complex story I've ever told, and it's a little intimidating. I'm not even going to lie. But long story short, they find this house and they decide that they want to move into it. It needs a lot of repairs. And basically they're living there for months and nothing is happening. There's nothing that's even remotely paranormal. But they start gutting the downstairs and they're rebuilding it, and they're sanding the walls. They're repairing different things in the house. And, you know, we've told a lot of stories in the past where renovations start occurring, and long and short of it is, you know, the paranormal kind of picks up. The biggest ones I think we've told over here, or we've talked about, the Perrin family haunting. That was the Conjuring one. We just did that a few weeks ago. When we covered the Smurl haunting, that also started with the renovations. And of course, probably the most important paranormal story, I think that started everything was the Amityville Horror. It also
Oh,
started with
yeah.
renovations. Even the haunting in Connecticut, that one started. That's where that boy, they moved to Connecticut to get closer for
Mhm.
like the cancer treatments that they were
The
doing.
treatments.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I mean, that one started with the renovations too. Uh, and we've even talked about that a few times. And even, the Wildwood, when we was at the Wildwood,
Mhm.
they're renovating there sometimes too. And it's like, okay, well, what's that really opening, I guess, for me?
Right.
And there's two really interesting theories about renovations. Do you know what they are? Well, one of them you definitely
Uh,
know because we've talked about it.
right. You mean the one where why ghosts float sometimes and
But
that kind of thing?
no, just why renovation period causes some of these things.
Oh, I don't know. Refresh my memory.
So we always talked about, and the way I've always thought of it is when they're renovating, maybe it's opening up some type of a residual haunting, right? Like
Mm.
maybe it's causing something that has pushed itself into like the woods and now you're sanding the woods. You're basically
Right.
wiping away anything that's protecting them from this. And maybe it
Mm.
goes into like a residual haunting. I think that is probably the kind of thing that we've talked about the most.
Right.
But I heard a theory when I was doing the research on this story, and I'm like, I've never heard that, but it makes a lot of sense. And we've talked about this, but in other stories in different ways, right? Like when we talked
Mhm.
about, not to go too far off, but like the Montauk Project, right?
Right.
They brought kids in, and what was they trying to do to the kids?
Open up latent abilities, basically.
Correct. By using fear and
Mhm.
intimidation and stuff like that. And then we've even talked about like all poltergeist cases start with
Right.
typically kids and they get scared and all that
Mhm.
stuff. Have you ever renovated a residence or anything before, Nick, or helped somebody?
Yes, I have actually quite a few times.
Would you say that that's probably one of the most frustrating and anxious moments to own something and then have to renovate?
I would say it is, and to add to the frustration, things just never go the way that you plan because until you start opening things up, you don't know what you're dealing with.
You have no clue. And that's the theory they have is because there's so many frustrations and anxiety and sleepless
Mhm.
nights that much like what we talk about when it comes to poltergeists, you're
Mhm.
feeding into an energy that something is then able to feed off of
Right.
and take that energy to create some type of conduit or like an opening in that
Mhm.
very thin veil that we always talk about.
I heard an interesting theory the other night as well, and I don't know how serious the person was or not,
Mhm.
but imagine that you want to protect against energy or radiation or something like that. What's the best blocker of that? Lead.
Energy or yeah. I didn't know if he's talking about like a metal, but yeah, like a lead would be, yeah.
Uh, yeah, so a lead would be. So this guy proposed that a lot of haunted houses get stirred up by renovations because one of the first things you do is you clear away paint, layers of paint and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And what was all the paint in old houses?
It was lead, yeah.
Yeah, so perhaps things that couldn't move beyond a certain point start to be able to flow and move again.
Oh, that's interesting theory too. I've never heard that before.
Hmm. I've just heard the other night, and it made a lot of
Hmm.
sense. I don't know if he was serious, but to me, something clicked there.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds serious to me.
Hmm.
Huh. That's a good way to look at it. Never even thought of that.
That's something to think about.
For sure. Well, obviously, they had all these frustrations. They're trying to get this house up and moving, and they just moved in. I think they lived there for 2 or 3 months. And their friend, Nicola, which we're not going to call Nick because that's too confusing. But in the story, if you read the book, they do call her Nick, Nic. But Nicola, she had just been traveling Eastern Africa and she had just moved back to the UK and pretty much, for lack of a better term, she was broke. She's trying to figure out what she was going to do once, she got back. And when she was talking to Ken and Debbie, which was friends of hers, they're like, "Hey, just come live with us, help us out." And if you help us out, we'll make it to where you don't really have to worry about paying us, but just help us decorate the house, maybe help us with some of the, reconstruction, some painting here and there. And she's like, yeah, absolutely. I don't have anything better to do. So they moved in and they was like, this is cool. It's going to be like friends living in the same spot. But this house was relatively small. It wasn't too big. So she goes over there and she's trying to help them out. And again, nothing really happened until one day, Nicola noticed that on the wall that was between the kitchen and the bathroom. And again, you got to remember, this is a really small house. So when they're camping out in these little areas, it's easy to look across and kind of look into like another room. It's not like it's a huge establishment, but when she was looking, she had noticed that there was a marking on the wall. Now they had just painted those walls. So she's like, crap, I just painted this wall and now, which is not uncommon, right? Like these houses, when you do this remodeling, it's dusty. It's easy, especially if you're moving furniture around, to bump into a wall or maybe something's not even dry. So it's not uncommon to be like, okay, well, I probably just, when I was walking through there and carrying something, maybe something accidentally hit the wall. So she walks over and she's like, crap, we're going to have to fix that. She's a little bit frustrated, but then she gets looking at it and she goes, it's kind of an irregular look to the marks. So Ken and Debbie, they end up coming down later and she's like, hey, that wall's got a mark on it, which kind of sucks. We're going to have to repaint. So Debbie goes over and she starts looking and she goes, "Do you look at what this looks like?" And she goes, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "It looks like footprints." But these footprints was going up the wall.
That's interesting. I've not heard that before.
Very interesting. So it's one of those cases where they're like, that's odd. Like, why would something? So the first thing they got is, okay, well, someone's pulling a prank, right? Because, everyone's starting to look at everyone like, okay, he's doing this. But there was a very interesting thing about the footprints that I've not gotten to yet. And, we always talk about when you're telling a story, when you're making something up, typically you don't elaborate too far, right? Like if I was to tell someone, hey, I live in a haunted house, I wouldn't start with footprints going up a wall. I'd go with, I heard scratching, or I heard a whisper in the dark, or, I felt something sit on my bed or something like that. The interesting thing about these footprints is they had 6 toes.
6 toes?
6 toes.
Oh, well, I don't know where this is leading at all then.
But that's what makes it interesting, right? Like if you're going to tell a ghost story or say, hey, my spot is haunted, do you think you would even remotely tell someone that you saw a 6-toed thing going up your wall? Like that's not how any ghost story ever starts.
Well, if I was telling a fib, I wouldn't want to make something less believable.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to make it so elaborate that people's like, come on, dude. Like that doesn't make any sense at all. And I love it because the very first strange that happens is that moment. And, because again, it was such a weird thing. Everyone's looking at it and Nicola's like, nope, I ain't doing this. So she goes and gets the paint that they used.
Right.
The paintbrush, she painted right over top of it. She's like, nope, I'm not looking at this. I want no part of that. Yeah. Footprints are weird enough. 6 toes going up a wall. I'm good.
Yeah, let's not even deal with this.
Let's not. And I think we all have done that, right? Like if there's something where we look at it and we're like, crap, I can't explain that. I'm just going to pretend like it didn't happen and keep moving. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Same thing with Nicola. Nicola's like, nope, not doing it. So, she covers it up with paint. Everything's going fine. And the very next morning, they all walk downstairs because, again, they're all upstairs sleeping. When they all come downstairs, would you like to take a wild guess what they saw on the wall again?
Footprints
with 6 toes. Now, the first thing that Ken thought is, well, maybe it's a case where it's like oil based and maybe it bled through the paint. That kind of thing happens. Or like if it's dirt and you didn't get the dirt off. And Nicola didn't wait. She just started painting. She's like, screw it. But when he looked at it, the angles of the footprints were completely different. So it was not the same footprints that was bleeding through from the old ones. These were brand new established footprints. So whatever it was would have had to walk through the dust and then up the wall. So I don't know. Have you ever heard of a story where there's footprints walking up the side of a wall?
No, this is a first for me.
I don't think
I've not heard that. And I've got theories going around in my head like the wall was made out of floorboards from another haunted house or something. I don't know.
But that's the thing, right? Like I've never heard anything like that. So I'm like, that's a very odd thing to have right away. But whatever. So they, paint over it again. And for the record, it never came back. So the second time they painted over it, it was done. But they painted over it and they're just like, you know what? We're living life. We're not going to even pretend like this is a thing. So a couple of days went by and they kind of forgot about it. They just kind of started moving on with life again. And Ken, Debbie, and Nicola, they basically decide, you know what? We need to go into Chester to buy some groceries, right? But when they got back, like me, I don't know if anyone's like me, but when I go to the grocery store, like my job as a man to see how many bags I can carry in one trip. Like I think that's a rule of all manhood.
Yeah, you cannot make multiple trips.
You can't.
You're not allowed to.
One and done. There's two things as a man. That's one of them. The second one is you cannot use a set of tongs without clicking it at least twice. Click, click. You cannot flip anything without that click, click. You can't do it. Okay.
Yeah. Or if you pick up a drill, you got to go zzz, zzz.
Exactly. You have to. Is it
right?
That's like the
man stuff.
Test of manhood, right? So another bad habit that I have is when I bring groceries in like that, I put them all down on the floor. And then that's how we start putting stuff away. Typically, Jess is the one that puts everything away. So I carry everything in with my big, massive arms and all the strength that I got carrying 75 bags, and she puts everything
grunting the whole way,
grunting the whole way, caveman. But trying not to, right? Like you're trying to breathe, but you're breathing through your mouth sideways. You're like, but you're trying not to make it look like it, So same thing happens. They bring all the groceries in, they put them on the floor, and they put most of it away. But they left a few things out. So, they go to bed, time goes by, they get up the next morning, and what they find is some of the cat cans. They're like the metal cans, like the cat food comes in.
Yeah.
They're stacked up into a pyramid shape.
Oh, that's interesting.
Makes no sense. They're looking at it.
Very
they're trying
poltergeist vibes here.
Very poltergeist.
Like the movie Poltergeist.
100%. And then you sit there and you go, why in the world would it be in the shape of a pyramid? Like that doesn't really make sense. They get close. They take it all down. They're like, whatever. Now at this stage, John, he's a guy that's also in the story, but we've not really talked about him. The best dynamic to explain to everybody is Debbie's just kind of, according to the books from what I've read, she's not really working. Like she's doing some things here and there. She's doing some stuff and she's renovating. Ken, he works for the schools. And of course, Nicola, who comes from South Africa, she's trying to find a job and trying to figure out her life and all that stuff. There's another man that we're going to bring into the story. His name is John. Now, John is working with Ken making music. So they all make music together and their goal is to try to get a band going and get some things kind of
cool.
Yeah. You're a music guy, so you understand, right?
Yeah.
So they start kind of looking at John sideways because they're like, if it's not me and it's not you and it's not her, the only other person that has access to the house is John.
Right.
Now there's some things that Ken wasn't necessarily too favorable of with Johnny. Obviously, John's the guitarist, and they all have recording equipment in the back room. But basically, Ken has noticed that John almost looks at Debbie kind of in a weird way sometimes, and it makes him a little uncomfortable.
I don't like that.
So, of course, by, all stretch of the imagination, Ken is thinking maybe John's got this weird sense of humor. He's kind of got this thing with Debbie. I don't necessarily trust him, but that seems like something that maybe he would do. So when these objects are starting to get arranged around the house, John is the person that I think that everyone's mind naturally went to. Nicola, even Debbie was like, he's kind of a weird cat. Like maybe he would do something like that because it was out of character for Ken and the other two. So to them, John's doing it, right? So all of a sudden, a little bit of time goes by and another stack appears. But this time it's a little bit harder to kind of joke this one off as a joke. What they find is made out of lemonade bottles, some more dry cat food, and kitchen paper towels, the rolls.
Right.
It builds another pyramid, but this one is 4 foot tall.
Oh, that's a big one.
Now let that sink in for a second.
Hmm.
It's made from paper towel rolls. It's made from dry cat food and lemonade bottles. Now, if you've ever done anything with paper towels, they don't necessarily stand up very well.
No. And dried cat food, that's got to be in like a bag, right?
Probably like a bag. They didn't specify, but if I was to assume, that's what I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, Ken walks downstairs and he sees this and he's just mesmerized. I mean, this thing's standing 4 foot tall. He's like, how in the world is this thing even standing? As he gets close to it, it falls to the floor and just goes all over the place. So it goes to show how flimsy it was. It was almost like gravity itself was not working for these things.
Or something holding it.
Or something holding it, possibly, yes.
Right.
But they're holding something that's 4 foot tall. Like that's.
Yeah, well, right.
That's
harder to blame on John.
That one, at that point, they're like, okay, there's something weird going on. I don't think John would have done this, but so now their mind's kind of wandering like, well, what's really going on? So if you think about it, now they're starting to piece some things together. They got those footprints. Then there was the cat tins that, those was stacked up. And now we've got this thing that's 4 foot tall. Like there's clearly something that's happening that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But what they're noticing is it's almost always in the kitchen area and near a wall in the kitchen.
Okay.
So they're starting to piece some stuff together. Now, around this same time, Nicola, she sees a very dense shadow that passes by her window just above the kitchen. So, of course, they're sitting there going, well, what do you mean you saw a shadow? And she's like, I really don't know how to explain it. Like it was this shadow that went in front of the window, scared her to death. Later that night, Ken and Debbie, they wake up and they feel like someone's in their bedroom. But as they look around, they don't really see anybody. There's no one there. They don't hear any sounds. There's no proof of anything. It's just another very odd occurrences. So now it's kind of getting to the point, like most hauntings that we talk about, where it's like, okay, something is truly happening here. We just don't know what it is. Like things are stacking up. The other interesting thing about poltergeist activity, and me and my kids, we just watched The Conjuring 2.
Okay.
Which is the infill poltergeist, right? And it really made me start thinking when I was researching the story that it's like, even in that story, like the amazing thing is sometimes the way that things could be held or pushed or manipulated or moved in a way to where you go, well, that's impossible. Clearly it's paranormal. That's kind of where this is taking shape too. It kind of feels that way because now it's getting to the point to where this isn't something you can easily explain away. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So, Ken, they're all just kind of trying to forget things that's happening, which is almost impossible, right? Like once something starts happening, you kind of start looking for it. And they're kind of the same way. They're kind of starting to go, okay, what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so, that really puts you on edge too.
100%.
Which probably doesn't help the situation at all.
Absolutely not. I mean, think about even when we went to the Wildwood that time, right? Once we found out there was a shadow in the room, it made us very apprehensive for probably an hour after that. Like, well, that happened right away. Like, what else is going to happen? You know what I'm saying? They're the same way because now they're dealing with all this stuff and they're having it happen in such a common way at this point to where they're like, something else has to happen. So Ken, he ends up going out for a drive because at this point, the pressure, the renovations, the frustration, all these things that's happening inside this cottage's house, he's like, I just need a break. Now, while he's gone, Debbie and Nicola, they're sitting by the fire and they're kind of talking and they're going over everything. And as they're going through the day, they had a newspaper that was sitting on the ground and that newspaper ends up lifting up into the sky. And then it ends up spreading all the pages out and all the pages go a different direction. Now they see this and they're like, hold on. And one thing that they noticed, which is something that we just noticed recently, was there was almost like this cold chill that ended up getting into the room. But the interesting thing about the cold chill is they talked about it being almost like a solid cold thing. So it's almost like there's something there. You could almost put your hand in a spot and feel something, but then pull your hand away. Now, we had an experience like that at the Wildwood.
Yeah, that's why I was just thinking. We felt the exact same thing.
Correct. And I mean, even, you know, I don't think I really asked you, what did that make you think of when you felt that in that moment? Because it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around.
Yeah. What it reminded me of is imagine a super hot sunny day and the contrast you feel when you reach into a freezer or something like that. Like that's it's not like it was hot in the basement, but the contrast between here and a millimeter away was so much of a heat difference that I just couldn't wrap my head around that, like you said.
And it's hard to think of it because, you know, there's a part of you that's like, if it's a breeze, if it's a draft, like you can typically follow that to a source.
Right.
And they did the same thing. They looked around the house. They went to every window, every door, every window, and every door was closed, sealed, no drafts, no cold spots. And after that moment passed, there was nothing there. So at this point, Nicola's like, you know what? I know I came to help y'all out. I don't know if I want to be here.
That was enough for her.
She was at the point where she's like, this is becoming too much. Like I'm seeing the shadow things now. This is not cool. So she's about to dip, but they kind of talk to her and they're like, you know what? You know, just, you can go if you want to. And she decides, you know what? I'm going to stay around a little bit longer. But if things get too much crazier, like I don't care how down on the luck I am, I need to move. You know what I'm saying?
Right. This is where the two Nick's personalities differ.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, I am never going anywhere.
Yeah. This Nick, he's like, I want to see more of this. The other Nicola, not so much. Yeah. Now, Ken's starting to feel kind of bad about some of this because he's like, I brought her into this. This is clearly not what she expected. And Nicola wanted to write some sketches with some dialogue. And Ken, he was a teacher for a high school. And I'm going to mispronounce a lot of these names because they're UK names. But Hawarden High School. But anyway, the schools used what's known as a BBC microcomputer. Now, again, we're talking about 1984. These computers are not like today's computers. They're pretty different. Okay. But he decides, you know what? We got these computers at the school. Maybe I can borrow one. I can take it to the house. Nicola, she can then type out some of these dialogues for writing the sketches. That'll get her back up on her feet. She's helping us with the renovations. There's a lot of stuff going on. I just think it's a good idea, and maybe it will make her feel better about the situation they're in. So they end up doing all this. He ends up bringing the computer in. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, it's not like a laptop. These computers were massive. And probably the most important part is they did not connect to the internet like at all. Internet was not happening in 1984 on this computer. What was the first computers you used, Nick?
So my dad worked for an insurance company when I was very young, and it was like I was quite far into high school before I even touched a computer.
Oh, wow.
By the way. But this company was upgrading their computers, so he brought home an old 386 turbo.
Oh, yeah.
That we cooked up. And I used that for years.
With a turbo button, baby. Bam, push it in. You get that turbo
I always
speed.
wonder why would you ever not turn the turbo on? Why does it even have a button for this?
Well, the interesting thing was some games worked better if you had the turbo off because it was built without it. Because those computers ran in megahertz, for anyone that doesn't know. We're not talking like nowadays. They were running in the megahertz.
Right.
Well, they had brought one of these in this story. So he sets it up in the kitchen, right? We talked about the kitchen kind of being a hot spot. And Ken shows Nicola basically how to use the word processor because that's what she would be using it for. He showed her how to create a file, how to name it, how to save it, how to bring it back up later. Because what a lot of the people doesn't understand is there was no hard drives. These all ran off of discs, and there's 2 sets of discs when I came up, 5 1/4 and 3 1/2. And in this story, I believe they were using 5 1/4. That's the indication that I've gotten based on what I've seen. So he's showing her, hey, here's how you do all this stuff. Here's how you use the word processor. Processor is going to be good for you. And the interesting thing was, these things were expensive, especially discs. A lot of times in the discs, they would, label things with names. So even like his colleagues at, the school, if they was using that computer, it wasn't being borrowed by him, they would know their files that they could use based on that disc. They would see their name on it. And for a while, the computer was just a useful thing in the middle of the house. If anything, I think Ken and Debbie saw it as a way to play some old video games. And for Nicola, she was able to write these scripts out. So, when we're talking about video games, we're not talking about like Call of Duty for all you youngins. Okay. A little bit different games, but it was one Sunday night in December. Ken got bored and suggested that, maybe it's a case where they should visit a friend. And the friend's name is Dave. You're going to hear Dave's name come up a few times. The name is Dave Lavelle. So Ken, Debbie, and Nicola, they leave the cottage for a few hours. The computer's left all alone. They leave it on. And when they get back, Ken notices the computer, it's still running, still lit up. The green glow of the computer, is shifting the old light. But the screen is returned back to the basic BBC screen, which is not where it should be. It doesn't make sense. So he goes back to the word processor, checks the disk index, and what he expects to see is where Nicola was, building some of these scripts and stuff. He noticed a file that didn't make sense to be on that drive, and the file was just called KDN.
KDN, okay.
Would you know what KDN would stand for?
I don't. I was seeing how close they are on the keyboard.
So KDN, Ken, Debbie, Nicola.
Oh, okay.
So he looks at that, and that's kind of what got his attention because he goes, well, that's weird. That's our initials to our names. So he opens it up, and the message inside is addressed to him, Ken, Debbie, and Nicola. The message is strange, kind of broken. It talks about nightmares and silent bodies and a flower turning toward. In fact, let me just read it to you. Let me just read you the actual letter. And this is going to be important. I'm going to read maybe a few of these letters, and then I'm probably going to just explain them. But basically, it's I'm probably going to put on the screen the way it's wrote out because you can tell whatever was using this was struggle bussing. And if I struggle reading this, it's not because I can't read, it's because this is complicated. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it in Discord for you, Nick, so you can see some of the struggle that I'm going to be dealing with because this thing it's tough. It's not going to be easy at all. This is exactly how it's wrote out, Nick. So it says, Ken.
Good luck.
Yeah. Ken, Deb, Nick. True are the nightmares of a person that fears. Safe are the bodies of the silent world. Turn, pretty flower, turn towards the sun, for you shall grow and sow. But the flower reaches too high and withers in the burning light. Get out your bricks. Pussycat, pussycat went to London to seek fame and fortune. Faith must not be lost, for this shall be your redeemer.
Well, that is particularly cryptic.
Very cryptic message, and it didn't even make sense. And, if you're looking at this, it doesn't sound like a normal note. It reads almost like a riddle, right? Like when I look at that, I think, oh, that's kind of like a riddle, right? Like that's where my mind would go to.
This has meaning, some secret meaning.
Yeah, like there's something to it. But again, you got to remember there's computers in the house, and the only people that has access to the house is Ken, Debbie, Nicola, and John. right? But
Right.
they've already determined, well, John, what's the odds that he's doing something like that? Doesn't make a lot of sense. And does he even know how to use this computer? I mean, we're talking about 1984. Not a lot of people would know. So it's really only him. And at this point, Debbie and Nicola that would even know how to use this computer. So
And they were all together. So
yeah, and they were all together when they left. When they came back, this message was there. So, but again, I think in your head, you're kind of like, man, did maybe someone sneak over there before we left and put this little message there? Or maybe they was using the computer. It was just a random file, but they start asking each other. Ken starts asking Nicola and Debbie, did you write this? And they go, well, no, we didn't write this. Like, we have no clue what this is. And he goes, okay. But in the back of his mind, in their minds, they're sitting there going, okay, is Ken just pulling the wool over our eyes? Like, is he trying to scare us or something? So again, everyone's kind of looking at each other going, wait a second. So Ken ends up taking the computer back to school the next day, ends up printing it off. And, at that point in time, it's a little bit less scary to him because when it's printed off, it's not like when you're looking at a computer screen that no one should have access to. Again, it's not like it's on the internet and connecting and someone's writing you a message like this.
Right.
Someone had to sit down and write this message. So, that's around December. About 2 months goes by, and in February, they don't know the exact date of this because, again, they wasn't necessarily keeping records of a lot of this stuff. But again, it's Ken, Debbie, and Nicola. They leave the cottage. The computer's back at home. He borrowed it again. Computer's completely unattended. No one's there. No one has access to the cottage. They end up leaving, and when they come back, Nicola jokes. She goes, wonder if there's anything on that computer over there. I wonder if we got another cryptic message. So Ken, of course, he laughs and he goes over and he checks, and lo and behold, there's a file called REATE.
Oh, REATE?
REATE.
Oh, is it like supposed to be create, maybe? I don't know.
Glad you said that. So Ken realizes that on the word processor that they're using, like in the old days, sometimes to create a new file, you would press the C button.
Right.
It would open up your window and then you would type your name in. Well, if someone pressed the C and didn't press the C again for the word create, C would open up the window. They would put REATE. They would hit save, and that would be the file. So he looks at it and he goes, well, that's odd. It's very odd. But, he kind of made note of that. And this letter's written quite a bit different than the first one we just read. I'm going to do the best I can on this one also.
Okay.
This one I will struggle on 1,000%. It says, I write on behalf of many. What strange words thou speak, although I must confess that I hath also been ill-schooled. Sometimes methinks altercations are somewhat barful, for the break may asleep in mine bed. Thou art godly man, who hath faithful woman who dwells in mine home. I hath no way to affray, for online sith my hath with antics has ripped atwan mine bound. Hath I been reth a night, I hath seen many altercations. Lastly, charge house and thou home. 'Tis a fitting place with lights which devil maketh, and costly things that online mine friend Edmund Gray can afford, or the king himself. 'Twas a great crime to hath bribed my house, LW. It's a lot of very English words that's from that old century. Basically, what LW, which is how it was signed off at the end, says that Ken's basically a good man. He mentions the fact that there's women inside the house, and he talks about the lights and how there's strange objects inside his cottage.
Right.
Things that would have looked completely unnatural to someone from a specific time period that would have been talking like this. So, you look at this English and it's spelled very differently. Like a prime example for those of you that's listening, to give you an example, right? Like a lot of these
words I didn't recognize.
I did not either. And there's a good reason for it. We're going to figure that out here in a few minutes.
Okay.
But like many is spelled M-A-N-Y-E. I write, W-R-Y-T-E. On behalf, B-E-H-A-L.
Oh, this is Old English.
Old English. We're talking really old English.
Yeah.
So, he's talking about all these different things that's happening inside his house. He says that Ken and the others that's living inside his house, he's referring to it as, this is my house. You're in my home. It's not just this cottage, not just, this facility that anyone can be at. He's saying you people are in my house. Now, from Ken's side, this cottage, it's his home in the year 1985. He's living there. He's renovating it. He's dealing with all the stresses. He's got all this money invested in. Now he has this invisible person that's typing these messages out. But in the back of his mind, he's like, man, why in the world did Nicola tell me to check this file? And then I go check and it's there. So he's like, that's very odd. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. But
I'd be suspicious of Nicola now.
That's the thing, right? But again, she's always with them when this kind of thing's happening. So he's like, you know what? No one talks like this. No one's talked like this in probably hundreds of years. So he's got a friend of his. His name is Peter Tinder. Now, Peter Tinder, he isn't just some random Joe Schmo that this guy knows. Like, he taught Ken English when he was in high school, and he's a scholar in like that older language, that kind of English. So he takes everything to Peter and he goes, listen, you're not going to believe this story, and it makes absolutely no sense. I know it doesn't make any sense. Long and short of it, there's these files that's on the computer, and these files on the computer is writing in some old English that I can read, but not read well. Can you take a look at this and see if it makes sense? Hands it over to Peter. Peter starts looking at it, and Peter asks the very obvious question first. He looks right at Ken dead in the eyes and he goes, is this a hoax? Because he's looking at it.
Right to the point.
And he knows this probably doesn't look normal to most people, but I can read this and I understand it. But he's not going to put any effort in, because if it's a hoax, he doesn't have time for it. He's a very, I don't have time for that kind of demeanor. And of course, Ken says, of course not. I'm bringing it to you because it doesn't make sense. So right away, Peter's like, I don't care what you say about the paranormal stuff. That doesn't make sense to me, but I'll be able to help you with at least the English part of it. So he starts looking at it, and basically what Peter comes up with is there's certain words and spellings that look unusual. Some parts feel older than other, almost like it's like a fake old English. Other parts also don't line up very neatly. And Peter gives somewhat of kind of bad news to a degree. He's like, someone can take a look at the message without being, in kind of a fearful situation. If they look beyond like all the paranormal stuff, the thing that is kind of alarming to this is some of this language is a dialect that would have been from this area. But back then, he goes, most people don't even understand that dialect. So it's like, when I think about the way I talk, right? Like when I talk to some of my family, they use terminology like y'all, right?
Right.
A lot of people don't use y'all, but it's a dialect from a certain area, which means, you all.
Yeah. Someone put a dictionary up of the terms we use around here.
Yes.
That are used nowhere else.
Exactly.
So.
And, it's another good one is like my grandpa, when I was a kid, if you was eating something, you want to know if it was good, he'd say, hey, is that any count?
Say again?
Is that any count?
See, I wouldn't understand that if I saw it written down.
Doesn't make sense, right? But to us, it means, is it any good? Is it any account, basically? Is it like the higher the count, the better it is? Is it any count? But again, that's from that area. Same thing with this. They're looking at the English, and though some things don't quite line up, things don't quite make sense, there's dialect things that not just the average person that's trying to fake Old English would have known to do. So
Right.
Peter's kind of like, listen, there's something to it. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's definitely something there. So another thing that Peter says is, hey, maybe what you should do is maybe have someone else take a look at this too and kind of get an idea. So he tells his other buddy, his friend, John Cummins, and he goes, hey, that's kind of what happened. And John's a little bit more diplomatic. And he's like, well, that's interesting.
Right.
So he tells John, he goes, well, did you respond? Or he told Ken, he's like, did you respond? And Ken's like, what do you mean respond? And John's like, well, it's kind of unpolite if you don't respond back to the message.
That's kind of what I was thinking right now.
Yeah, he's like, you should totally reply. So up to this point, Ken and Debbie, they'd mostly just seen the things happening inside the house. They've gotten the messages. The first message was just freaky weird. It's this riddle kind of thing. Now they're getting this. So they're like, you know what? Maybe it's not a bad idea to maybe write a letter back. So Ken writes back to LW. He apologizes for disturbing him and basically was like, listen, I know we're here. We're making these noises. I apologize. But then he starts asking some questions because he wants to dig in because Peter also understands the history of that entire area. So he's like,
right,
we're going to figure out if this is a hoax pretty quick. So we're going to ask some questions. So he says, did you live on the land? What did you want from us? If you can see us and you're a part of this, then, what is it? Also, you're talking about this village. Tell me about the village and who is Edmund Gray? And also you said there's a king. What king are you reigning under? And what did you mean by the house belongs to you? Like, that doesn't make sense. What do you mean the house belongs to you? So he sends this message. And not very long after, it's, they all kind of step away for a little bit. I think it was maybe the next day, next morning, lo and behold, a reply comes back. And the message appears to place LW in the year 1521.
Oh, very specific now.
He says he's talking about Henry VIII. And the only problem is Henry VIII wasn't from 1521.
Okay.
It's not when his reign was from. Also, Edmund Gray, it's kind of hard to place. They don't talk about it. He talks about Kennerton Hall, which also raised some questions about the period because he was talking about a whole bunch of stuff. The biggest thing that he went over was basically, long story short, he was trying to give some type of information, but you could tell it was a little bit more tight-lipped. Like he didn't want to give too much away. Right. But the message in general was enough there to where Ken's looking at it and he's like, you know what? Maybe perhaps I can take this to Peter and maybe Peter can give some type of validation. But LW still didn't give a whole lot away. He kind of gave some of the basics. And again, he signed it this time instead of LW, Lucas, Lukas.
Okay.
So the writing's still difficult. There's spelling that's kind of strange, kind of like what we talked about before. The grammar's rough. The wording's not exactly modern English. He takes everything to Peter. Peter's taking a look at it and he goes, some things kind of fit. But the biggest things that don't make sense is Henry VIII wouldn't have fit. And this college that he says he's going to, it wouldn't even be formed for another 50 years.
Well, now that's interesting.
So again, the Henry VIII doesn't make sense. The college that he said he attended wouldn't even be built for another 50 years after the year that he said he's from. But Peter says something interesting because Ken's like, well, we need to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to ask him about that. I'm going to reply and have him answer. And Peter goes, no. Let's just let it go. And let's just see. Because if it's a hoax, let's let him basically dig their own grave.
Yeah, give him enough rope to hang himself.
Right. I mean, if this is someone that's from the earlier 1500s, well, clearly they would know all the things we're asking. It would make all the sense in the world. So he ends up going back and he kind of thanks now Lucas. We've got a first name for some of the information and, he's given some correspondence back and forth. And all of a sudden now there's another message comes through, and Lucas is kind of talking about his life a little bit more in this message. Now he talks about his wife. She died of pestilence, and he lost his newborn son. He talks about his farm, his land, his barley. He's growing some ale, his animals. He visits the market relatively often. He mentions Nontwitch and Chester, which is areas obviously near there. He talks about some of the shoes and how he makes the shoes from pig hide. He talks about his pigs and the fowl and the port of Chester, which I didn't know, but when I did research, there wasn't really much of a port. But there wasn't a whole lot of dramatic stuff that was really kind of going on. He talked about the living conditions, and one detail catches Ken's attention a little bit more than others. Lucas, he explains that his house is built on redstone footings.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing is when they was renovating the house and they started digging into the land, they found that their house was sitting on red brick footing.
Oh, interesting. So probably not a lot of other people would have known this.
The only way that anyone would have known this piece of information is when they was renovating, they was pulling some of these bricks out of the ground and they was throwing them over by the tree. But there was no explanation of what those bricks were. But he noticed that and he goes, that's really weird. Like, if everything else is fake, how's it possible that he would live on this red brick footing? We know there's some red brick footing in this housing. Like, it just doesn't really make sense. But he takes everything to Peter. Peter kind of continues to look at the language, and the messages are kind of giving him mixed signals. He's kind of confused by the entire thing. Some of the words and the spellings interesting to him because he's like, that's definitely a dialect from this area. Some parts seem almost like it's a casual imitation is probably the best way to put it. Almost like someone trying to fake it or make it look like that's the way it's supposed to be. But there's other parts that's obviously creating problems. One of the big things that he talked about was the punctuation. If the wording is done this way, well, the punctuation is not the same as what it would have been back then. It's using a more modern version of punctuation than what 1521 would have had, or 1524, whenever it was. So he's like, there's something odd about that that doesn't quite make sense.
Like a little more knowledge than the average person would have.
Well, they're saying that it was uncommon. It was completely uncommon to use that punctuation. The way punctuation was used in his time would have been significantly different than like punctuation they would have been using in 1984. But yet, it's using the 1984 punctuation, but using the wording and some of the words from the 1500s. Like it's kind of like we've got different punctuation now than we did in the, if you go back and read some of the stuff, you're like, why'd they put a period there for that? That doesn't make any sense. Kind of the same thing. But it was definitely one of those things where everyone was kind of leaning back and going, how is it even possible that someone from the 1500s would be on this computer? It just doesn't make sense. And of course, again, Peter's like, I don't care about the paranormal. It doesn't make any sense at all. But, they're still kind of corresponding back and forth. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And the interesting thing is, whenever Lucas is corresponding back and forth, there's some things that he talks about and some things that he doesn't ever really go into. One of the things that he never goes into is he never really talks about the files or the disks or the software or how he's even typing. Like, none of that stuff really makes sense. He just calls it a writing device. He says that he's seen Ken make the box light up, and he seems to be able to learn how to use it, whatever it is, and that it's just kind of appearing on his side. So that's how he's able to correspond back. And that's important because if you think about it, back then, if they would have saw a keyboard, how would they know the letters and everything, how to use it? Because you got to remember, there was nothing really there that would make any kind of sense. But he writes this letter and he's like, I don't understand what any of this is. But he mentions something else that's very interesting. When Lucas is talking about seeing the BBC Micro, and he's trying to explain how he's seeing it. For Ken, he refers to something called leems, Leems. Now, that word doesn't mean anything by today's standards, didn't mean anything in 1984. But in that time period, that would have meant a mysterious light box.
It's weird they'd even have a word for that.
Well, it's not. It's technically the combination of two words, but he's condensing it. But it's basically box of light.
Okay.
And that's how he's referring to it. But another interesting thing is when he signs off the last letter, he talks about how it's almost like the area that this box is in for him is not a kitchen area. It's technically where he sits in what would be like a living area.
Okay.
And he signs off, Lucas Wainman, gave a first and a last name.
Oh. Well, this opens up some research that could be done, maybe.
Correct. And that's what Peter thought. He's like, now we have a full name. We know the area. There's history. We'll be able to dig into this history and figure out what's possibly going on. So before we get too deep into that, he's still kind of corresponding back and forth. Then they're talking. And one of the things that Lucas mentions is when he sees Ken leaving, he sees him getting into this box and then leaving. Well, he finally figured out, well, he's clearly talking about his car.
Right.
But to Lucas, he's seeing this as some type of magic box that doesn't seem to make sense to him. And, we talk about this all the time when we talk about biblical and references and prophecies. Like if you're from a different time period and you look at something, you wouldn't know what that is.
Right. You got to interpret it in the context of what you're used to.
Correct. So Ken's seeing this and he's like, man, what if this is legit? Like, what if this is someone from the 1500s? I don't understand how this is working. He's like, since he's able to see some of the things in my life, I'm going to go and grab a magazine. I'm going to cut out a picture of a car and I'm going to put it on my keyboard and see if he can see it. So that evening he writes his letter. He cuts out a picture of a Jaguar XJ coupe and he leaves the picture on the keyboard. Now, Lucas, when he does respond, he responds that he's completely confused by the foreign object. He doesn't understand how a cart is able to run without horses. He doesn't understand anything about, is this like a wagon? Like, what is this object? But he doesn't refer to it as a car. He just has no frame of reference. But the thing that he's most amazed by is the glossy magazine photograph. He doesn't understand it.
Oh. Yes, I never even considered that. He wouldn't have seen anything like that.
No, he was wondering what type of wood that would have been made out of because parchment isn't shiny like that. And how was the picture drawn so perfectly? So to him, photos wasn't really a thing. So, when he talks about this and the reaction, it kind of fits, Ken, when he's talking about it, he's like, heck, he wouldn't know what it is. Like, that doesn't make any sense. When he looks back at the keyboard the next morning, the picture's there, but it's charred around all the edges.
Oh, interesting.
So the edge has been burned and the picture is actually pretty brittle, almost like it had been exposed to heat. Now, one of the things we talked about earlier is he's living inside of his cottage in the 1500s in the room with one of those massive fireplaces.
Right.
So Ken's sitting there going, if he's living in an area with a fireplace, it kind of makes sense that this paper would kind of wither up a little bit and maybe be a little bit more delicate. Like it kind of makes sense. So now things are kind of starting to click with him. Like none of this makes any sense, but I don't really know what else to do. So he's taking all these messages to Peter and Peter's like, we really need to dig into more. Like there really has to be something. It doesn't make sense. This obviously has to be an elaborate hoax. Like there's nothing else to it. Ask him where he went to college. Ask him where he did all this stuff. So he ends up going back and he's asking Lucas, where'd you go to college at? Because they're not finding him in the records anywhere.
Right.
He goes, I went to Jesus College in Oxford. On the surface, that sounds like a very useful detail, but when he gave it back to Peter and he explained it, well, obviously Lucas, it sounded like a man of education, like he's writing at a very high degree. The Jesus College of Oxford wouldn't have been built for that 50 years. So again, he's confirming things that they know is completely impossible. Like it doesn't make sense.
Multiple times now.
Correct.
Like this is rough because if someone were faking it, they wouldn't keep consistently making these same errors, I wouldn't think.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like if he's living in the 1500s, even if it was early to mid 1500s, right? He couldn't have studied at a school that never existed.
Right.
So the first thing I thought, just when I was researching this, is I'm like, we always talk about interdimensional planes, right? Or like alternate universes. Maybe that's what this is. Maybe it's like an alternate universe. So they're still living in the same area, but because of the difference, we always talk about there's like millions or uncontrollable amounts of versions of me, and each one's a little different.
Right.
Maybe that's what this is. And it kind of made sense and it started clicking. I'm like, well, maybe that's what it is. So Ken tries to kind of walk around it again. He doesn't really mention it. He doesn't correct it. Well, Lucas becomes a little confused in one of his messages, and he goes, you said you're a man of scholar yourself, like you're a very educated man. The thing I can't figure out is I've gave you some misinformation. You didn't correct me at all.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Oh, I love this.
So Ken was kind of caught off guard by this a little bit. Because Ken, he's been treating everything like the gospel. But now Lucas is kind of testing him, going, yeah, I'm from this time period, and I'm from this, and this is where I went to college, and there's this, and there's that. And you didn't correct any of it. Are you sure you're a man of scholar?
So maybe he doesn't believe that he's from the future.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Oh, this is getting wicked interesting.
So after, they're looking at this charred photo and they're trying to make sense of it. None of it makes sense. Again, when you're looking at this story, it's very confusing. And at this point in time, when I was researching, I'm like, I need to lean back. Let's say Lucas is a legit person.
Right.
As crazy as that sounds. If you're Lucas in the 1500s, there's this mystical, magical box. You're hearing people walking around your house and talking. You're watching them get into this magic box that doesn't make any sense. And he doesn't even understand the terminology of driving away. You're just, you're floating away.
Right.
How do you not think that's not demonic in that time period?
Well, I was just thinking, how is the person not like running, screaming from the house saying, witchcraft, witchcraft?
Right. I mean, to Lucas, everything has to be a little bit scary, right? Because he doesn't understand what's all these sounds, what's all these lights, how am I hearing people? Maybe this is a me thing, or maybe this is demonic. Maybe this is the devil. Who knows what's going through this man's head? If someone came to me with some form of technology I've never seen, I would assume it's UFOs, right?
Right. That's how we put it in our modern context.
100%, because we have to. It just makes the most sense. The biggest development is now Lucas is not only taking tests from Ken, he's testing Ken.
Right.
Hey, you said you can see in my time period. I'm giving you information and you're not correcting any of it. Are you sure you are what you say you are?
Right.
So from his side, now, not only is Ken testing Lucas, Lucas is testing Ken when it comes to words, dates, locations, claims. And Lucas is doing the same thing to Ken. Because he wants to understand. You're saying you're from 1984? Prove it.
Right. Yeah. This is a ghost story from two angles.
Correct.
This is wild.
It's wild. It reminds me of the movie The Others, kind of.
Yeah, we talked about that a little last week, and I hadn't seen it yet.
Such a good movie.
Wasn't there a movie one time? I think it was Tom Hanks and someone else where they would put a letter into the mailbox and it would appear in the past.
Or think about the movie Frequency. That's another example kind of this too. Yes. But at the very end of the last message that Lucas sent Ken, he kind of flips the story a little bit. He says, you talk about how scared you are of me. You're saying Ken is scared of Lucas. Well, I'm here to tell you, Lucas is scared of Ken.
Right.
So from Ken's side, Lucas, it kind of looks like a haunting, obviously. They reconstruct this house. Things are going on. He's got this voice that's on the computer, a man claiming to own the house. You got the presence connected to everything happening, things moving, footsteps going up the side of the wall, like all kinds of crazy things. But from Lucas's side, Ken and Debbie, they might be the haunting.
Right.
He's talking about things and describing powers that almost sound supernatural.
Yeah, and he said the devil lights in my home.
Correct. And he said there was something about that in his very first letter. The devil maketh this light. So in his mind already, he was like, this might be some demonic stuff going on.
Right.
This is where the concept of the book called The Vertical Plane came from, because it's basically like a simple haunting cottage story in the beginning. But as you go a little bit further, the concept is almost like, how like scientists talk about the farther you dig into the ground, you'll see different layers, but each layer is defined, right? That's exactly what this is. Same area, but on a different plane. And as they dig down, now we're into Lucas's stuff. So there's all this stuff going on. There's a lot of corrections going on. Basically, Ken reaches back out to Lucas and goes, listen, I'm sorry. I did know some of this stuff. I just wanted to see what was legit. I want to try to figure out, because we don't understand what's happening either. I'm confused by all this just as much as you are. I'm just trying to make sense of it. Lucas would respond back and he would say, there's no way that I could have attended Jesus College. This is the actual college that I went to. And then they go and they look it up, and that fit perfectly with the timeline. But Peter's still kind of confused. He's like, well, if he went to college there, I need some information. Have him prove it. Like he says he went to that college, prove it. So he goes back to Lucas and he goes, I want proof that you went to this college. And he goes, it's simple. There's an inscription on the bottom of this stairway that a lot of people don't know about. But if you go to this hallway, you'll find the inscription. Peter had never heard any of this.
Right.
Peter drives to the college that weekend, goes to the hallway, finds the inscription.
Ooh.
So there's something there. We don't know what it is or why it is, but there's some truth that's happening.
I do have a question, though.
Yep.
So the college wasn't built till much later, right?
50 years, but he went to a college that was during his time period.
Right.
Which would make sense.
And also, the king came later as well, right?
Correct.
50 years.
Correct.
How did he know about those to lie about those?
Here's the thing, and this is my speculation, because the story doesn't, I hate to tell everyone, once we get to the end of this, there's a lot of things that still don't make 100% sense. I don't think he's from 1924. I think he's from further than that, but he's saying, or I'm sorry, not 1924, 1524, 1521, whatever it is. I don't think he's from that time period. I think he's from after, but from the very beginning, he's testing what he thinks is these demons or devils.
Right. Well, it would have to be.
Right.
Because how, if he went to college at this time, how would he have knowledge of 50 years in the future to lie about it consistently?
Correct. It doesn't make
That's the
sense.
thing. Right.
And there's no
I'm wondering
pure
if his
answer.
name's even real.
Well, they can't find his name anywhere.
Right. Would you tell the devil your name?
It's a great question.
Mm.
We're going to answer that. We're going to answer that.
Okay.
We know the
All
answer
right.
to this. I know the answer
great.
to this.
Yeah, I don't know who you mean when you say we, because I don't know the answer to this and I want to know.
Well, anyway, Ken's still trying to understand the messages, talking to Peter about the languages. They're trying to piece it together. Debbie's starting to have experiences that have nothing to do with the computer. She starts having dreams, or she almost calls them like out-of-body experiences, is more like what it kind of feels like. She describes a room that almost forms around her when she's in like this dreamlike state.
Mm-hmm.
She says it starts kind of like a light, and then colors, and then shapes, and it kind of blends all in. And then the space becomes quite clear, and she finds herself near a fireplace.
Interesting.
Now, in Ken's area, the area that he stays in has a massive fireplace. She says the room doesn't feel like the Meadow Cottage at all, or cottage at all. She doesn't know it, but when she looks out, she sees a man, and he's dressed very poorly, like he doesn't seem to have a lot of money. And he almost looks over at her like he can see her, and he starts to react to her. And she says she's aware enough to where she's experiencing things and starting to question what's happening. And she doesn't know if she should say something or do something. She's kind of scared. So she says she kind of, if anything, pulls back a little bit, and she closes her eyes, and then she ends up waking up. And when she wakes up, she's back in her time period. Now, what's interesting is, as these dreams are happening, you've got Ken that's sitting over there, and all of a sudden he hears that ever so popular noise. For anyone that doesn't know,
Computers.
that computer floppy drive, it makes a noise when it's writing.
Right.
Those computers typically didn't make any noises, only when it was writing, and they had their own little disk thing. So he knew a message came in almost instantly right after she came back from one of these dreams. She opens up the file, or he opens up the file, and it's a message from Lucas again. Lucas writes about seeing a fair young woman that appeared in front of him while he was sitting at the table, and she formed like an angel beside the fireplace.
Wow.
So he's reading this, and he's completely confused with what's happening. Like, it doesn't seem to make any sense. He said just as he started to get up and try to touch her, she vanished, and wanted to know if it had anything to do with them. He said it's the first time he had seen anything like this except for one other time. So that part kind of makes Debbie's experience feel like, well, did she maybe teleport to that time period? Even though she felt like it was a dream, but to him, it was like a dream too, but he was wide awake for the whole entire thing. So now they're corresponding back and forth, and Debbie's confused by it. Ken's super confused by it. Like, none of them can truly understand what's happening. And, you know, these things just keep happening. So as time kind of goes by, they determine that these dreams, they might have some type of correlation. Like there's clearly something happening that's paranormal, and it's kind of scary to both of them to a degree.
Right.
In one of the dreams, she almost like forms near the bed, and she says that Lucas looks up at her, or who the man, she doesn't know if it's Lucas. They're assuming it's Lucas at this point.
It seems like it.
Right. And he says that he looks up at her and then touches her and starts to pull her down onto the bed. He's almost got like this crush on her.
Right. Oh, okay.
So now we're getting into a weird situation where it's like, okay, this is becoming a little bit too weird. Like, there's a lot of things that we don't like. There's things that at this point, it's like, we're cool with you, but if this is happening, like, it's scaring, you know, Debbie to death. because,
Right.
back then that was probably acceptable, not in 1984.
Right. And she's got no control over this. She might be thinking,
Correct.
geez, I don't want to go to bed. Am I going to end up, in some bad scenario?
Correct. So it's definitely a rough situation. So Ken and Debbie is obviously dealing with all that. They're still having things happening around the house too. It's slowed down,
Right.
but it's not completely gone. Lucas ends up telling Ken that he's speaking to, as he referred to it, a learned friend from Stopford, which they assume was probably like Stockport. They thought maybe it's like a screw up when he was typing or whatever. And he said that this man is highly educated, that he understands everything that's going on. And he talks to his friends about the strange lighted writing device. He's communicating with people and claims that they live hundreds of years ahead of him. And basically, Lucas's friends is like, don't tell anybody about this.
Well, I was just thinking about that. He's going to get in trouble.
Yeah. Basically, what his friend told him is like, listen, if you're telling me about this, and I'm already a little bit leery about this, if a man's claiming to speak with people from an unknown world through strange devices, they're going to either accuse him of being mad, heresy, witchcraft, maybe treason. Like, there's so much danger in telling anybody, but even as minuscule as what it is, even if they don't do any of those things, you'll be the laughing stock. Like no one will, you'll be unable to work with anyone. So
yeah, there's probably at that time, maybe 40 people total. You can't alienate yourself from all these people.
Correct. So Lucas's friend, he's like, I kind of want to understand what's going on. So Lucas brings him over to his house and he's like, I just want you to see this. And he's completely perplexed. He's like, I don't understand. But they start getting messages from somebody else that isn't typing the same way as Lucas. Completely different person. It's obvious. And he's almost as interested about now as what they are in the time period they're in. So he's asking questions like, okay, when does Henry VIII's reign end? When is this done? He asks about who's going to take over the crown. He asks about people in Ken's time and how they healed diseases. So that's what he wants to know. And then Ken starts kind of thinking about all this and he starts saying, you know what? Here's the thing. In 1985, all these questions, they sound historical, but in Lucas's world, they're all political. If you know when Henry VIII dies or who's coming next or what power, that's extremely valuable information. Like that's life-changing information. And it could help someone choose the winning side before anyone else even knows what side's going to win.
Right. And when this other guy started talking, it leads more credence that they actually are in Henry VIII's time.
Correct.
And that was just like a bluff before.
Like a ruse, right?
Yeah.
And this really, if you think about it, the same thing kind of happens with the disease, right? It's like back then you wouldn't know. A lot of times in the 1500s, you thought that things were being caused by, demons or the devil is doing it.
Ghosts in the blood and
100%, like crazy things. So being able to give someone a little piece of information would change a lot of things in their time period. So Ken and Debbie, they thought that maybe they only wanted to speak mainly with Lucas. Now, other people around Lucas, maybe knowing something might not be too good because now it's not really in a case where it's even private. So once the friends start getting involved, the conversations are not only strange, but it's kind of risky because, every answer that Ken gives could create a completely different set of consequences, right? Anyone that's watched Back to the Future knows this. If you give up too much information, now you're changing time completely.
Well, that's what I started to think when we got into this, like, especially when he asked, like, how do you cure diseases and stuff like that?
Exactly. So that's where it becomes kind of complicated because, again, if you give somebody a date, a name, a medical detail that, might seem harmless in our time period, well, heck, during the Tudor England time period, I mean, that's real decisions, real people, and real danger. And this is kind of where things get a little bit different because now they're kind of having this issue. What can we tell and what should we not tell?
This is like Star Trek: The Prime Directive.
Never seen
Like
it.
you can't. Oh, so it's just Star Trek, but the first rule of Starfleet. Man, I sound like a total nerd now. is is the Prime Directive is that they can't influence the development of a culture that is not at the stage theirs is.
Oh.
So yeah, they can't give out their technology to them. They can't give them information about things that they haven't figured out on their own, kind of thing.
Well, this would definitely fit into that. It would definitely be kind of like
Right.
that, yes.
Mm.
So they're trying to piece everything together. And one day when they're talking to Lucas, Lucas writes them back because now Lucas is trying to figure things out too. And he says
Right.
he thought that Ken and Debbie was also from the year 2109,
2109.
like the friend who brought the leems.
What?
I'm going to let that sink in for a second. In his letter,
I'm confused.
In his letter, he said he thought Ken and Debbie was also from 2109, like the friend who brought the leems. Now, if you remember, leems was the terminology for
The light,
of box. Yes.
Right.
So until now, we've always thought it was just two people building a side. Ken and Debbie in 1985 inside this little cottage with this BBC micro, and Lucas in the 1500s. That's always been the two people, and we believe they're just in the same house. Now Lucas is saying that there's another time involved, which is 2109.
Right.
So at this point, Ken is like completely confused. So Ken, just out of curiosity, inside the message in the files says 2109. Are you there, 2109?
Oh.
Little time goes by, and then a message pops in. Ken, Deb, and Peter, we are sorry that we cannot give you but only two choices. One, that you either have your predicament explained in such a non-rhyme way that you may have instant understanding but cause what should not be to happen, or two, try to understand that you three have a purpose that shall in your lifetime change the face of history. We, 2109, must not affect your thoughts directly, but give you some sort of guidance that will allow some room for your own destiny. All I can say is that we are all part of the same God, whatever he, it, with a question mark in parentheses, is.
This has just gone beyond what I expected we would be seeing here. I don't even know how to respond to this. Like,
how wild is that?
It kind of explains why they weren't jumping into this other conversation. They were just letting it go. So
makes no sense. The big thing is this was spoken in proper English, like 1984
right.
perfect
I could
punctuation.
tell when you were reading it. Yeah.
Word for word. That's why I wanted to read at least 3 letters.
Right.
Now, the very first letter, do you remember what I read?
I have it on the Discord.
Yep. Very cryptic.
And yeah.
But it definitely kind of fits a newer age way of talking versus Lucas.
Right.
That's very different. So to a degree, when you look at the message from 2109, the message feels colder. It almost feels more modern than Lucas, if anything.
Yeah.
But it's still odd. It doesn't make sense. The spelling's strange. The voice talks about destiny and choices and guidance and purpose and history. It tells Ken, Debbie, and Peter, so clearly it's been watching all of these people corresponding, that there's something bigger that they can understand. Now, Ken, he's completely like, wait a second. So there's been someone else that's been watching this entire thing and allowing things to happen
Yeah, or even caused it to happen if they're saying that the 2109 brought the leems.
Now, the interesting thing is,
Mhm.
as they start talking to Lucas again back and forth, they discover that Lucas said that this entity also came from the fireplace and gave them the box. But he said that it was a green being.
A green being. Okay.
That's what he said.
Like
Now, the
like a
problem is,
stereotypical alien almost.
bingo, put a pin in
Right.
that, because we're
Okay.
going to be talking about that at some point. So with Lucas, Ken can only apologize. There's either something that's happening, they've built this relationship, but now with 2109, he feels like he's kind of being set up to a degree, right?
Right.
They claim they can't directly affect his own thoughts. They can't tell him what to do. They can't guide him. There's no reassurance from it at all. Basically, they're like, this dude is in danger and you got to figure out what you want to do, because now people on his side knows what's happening.
Oh.
So 2109 is entering and kind of complicating things to a degree.
Right. Well,
He's like
a big degree.
Yeah, he's like Doc from Back to the Future, but colder.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, he's not really going to help you out so much. He's just going to tell you that something's wrong.
Correct. And if you got to think about it, if Lucas was not the one that created the, as he puts it, leems, and Ken didn't create the leems, then someone else may have placed it there, being this 2109 figure, which sure does sound an awful lot like an alien based on kind of like what we talk about, right? So now you've got all these things that's happening, but there's a small problem that's starting to occur. There's some things that's getting round about Lucas and potentially some things that don't make sense. And, you know, after 2109 kind of explain what's going on, there is a theory that Lucas might be in some form of danger. In fact, Lucas disappears. He doesn't even message for a few days. A few days go by. They don't get any messages. Ken's starting to write frantically, and now no one's responding. 2109's not responding. Lucas isn't responding. And then all of a sudden, Lucas sends a message. It's like 3 days later. And when Lucas is talking, he's talking about how he had this memory. And with this memory, he talked about there was this lady, Elizabeth Barton, known as the Maid of Kent. Elizabeth Barton had been connected to religious oppositions against Henry VIII, breaking up and with Rome, and her prophecies. You got to understand, like, we talk about these people like that's our history. He's talking about them like he knows them.
Yeah, this is what's going on now.
Right. So more of the story is they're like, well, where did you go? Like, where have you been? And he goes, I was thrown into a dungeon, beat, and almost killed.
Oh, wow.
Because now they're starting to think that there's something up with him.
Right.
So
he told one too many persons.
Yes. Or he told one person told other people, or people, again, if he's seeing this box, who's to say they're not walking by his window and seeing this mysterious light coming?
Well, that's right too. Yeah.
Like, nobody really knows what's is able to see. Like, no one really knows. So now he's like, I don't know what to do. I'm in great political danger. Like, you know, if I don't do something, like, they're going to kill me. Like, they're legit going to kill me. So now it's like a major kind of turn of events, because now they're like, well, what do we do? Like, what can we do?
Right.
So Ken, Debbie, and Peter, they send Lucas a little bit of information about the Bishop of Man and Elizabeth Barton, because for anyone that knows your history, there's a little thing that was going on there. And they explain that how the sheriff knew about it. And the sheriff had a little bit of information that he wasn't necessarily divulging. So Lucas writes back and says he didn't know anything about man. He basically says that, you know, he's going to try to go to the sheriff and see if maybe there's something he can do to try to save his life. So Ken writes back, but again, doesn't get anything.
Right.
He waits.
So they got him now, is what he's thinking.
Well, he waits and he waits and he waits, and there's just nothing there. Eventually, Ken, he goes over to his buddy Dave's house. We talked about Dave earlier, just to try to get the pressure. And all of a sudden, he gets a phone call. And when he gets a phone call, it's coming from Debbie. Debbie's like, a message just came in from Lucas. He said that Lucas said that he could hear Catherine crying for him. She was only 14, and he fears that she may have been taken as a witch because of him. So he was giving information out that was leading to all this stuff. And now all of a sudden, people's looking at her. She's 14. She's clearly a witch. So now the danger is not just around Lucas, but also around this young woman. So they gave information that's now implementing, or not implementing, but I mean, guess implementing. Yeah. All these different people that wasn't even part of the story. So Lucas says that he spent several days and nights where he wasn't able to sleep. He wasn't able to basically understand. He was trying to figure out a way to make it work. But he's like, basically at this point in time, I have a trial. I have a trial tomorrow. He goes, I don't know what to do. He goes, but I'm going to go in front of all these people. And if I fail that trial, I will be put to death.
Wow.
So now you've got Ken and Debbie and Peter, this, like, do we give him more information?
Well, they got to do something.
Is there anything we can, well, that becomes the question, right? We always talk about, if you got one person tied to this train track,
you
got 10 people tied to this train track, who do you save? If you give him information, you could kill a whole bunch of people.
Right, that is true.
Do you save Lucas and kill all the other people, or do you just let things play out the way it is?
I feel like there's a little less risk because all these people are long dead anyway, so.
Perhaps.
I'd try to save Lucas, is what I do.
Perhaps. Well, before they even have a chance to send a last message, Lucas sends one last message. Lucas says he's not afraid of dying. He understands that it's possibly a part of his destiny. He says it'll probably be the last time he'll ever be able to message because he understands what he's dealing with and the implications of that. Then he says farewell and long live Oxford.